Well, I think Rerum Novarum was concerned, among other things, with the challenge of grave inequalities between the working class and the ownership class in the 19th century at the beginning of the industrial age. And let's remember there were not a lot of regulations in place by law. So you had people working at a very young age, like children, and they were working sometimes all day and working hours that were, you know, ridiculous, and they were working for low wages that were not life-giving and not life-sustaining. So you needed more regulation to create a just work environment. Of course, that can still exist in manifold ways, but it seems to me on an international scale, we live now in an epoch where there are also vast wealth inequalities between countries, and then this in turn can reinforce political destabilization, where you have some countries that are brokering relationships through unequal power relations. Now, everything's not about equality, but there is a way in which everything is about the common good, in which smaller parties, smaller countries, people who have less power, less economic wealth, are being brought up into a higher sphere of education, of legitimate governmental autonomy, of wealth production, and are not being diminished through their mutual relations, so the mutual relations are not exploitative. So that's clearly one place that there continues to be important challenges. This is all now happening also in an era where there's a lot of migration and change of place among peoples, and radical challenges coming from changes in demographics. You have often the countries where you have the most production of the greatest wealth, which is human life, they're not the countries which have the greatest material wealth, and then you have countries with greater material wealth that have less children, and they have therefore actually kind of in a way less future. How do you negotiate between those things? How do you look at a greater harmony between civilizations when some of the civilizations have the wealth but not the people, and others have more of the people and not the wealth? And how's that going to work out in a just and equitable way over time for all? There's also just questions about how a global economy correlates with a more nationalistic international polity. So you have nation states who are thriving for their own autonomy, but you have a lot of mutual interdependence economically. Well, that could be a recipe for deep conflict and war. That could also be a recipe for finding ways to coexist and practice subsidiarity and solidarity among nations. So I think we just need partly people to articulate this and to point us towards the principles that are helpful if we're going to make progress in all these things.